Kip, what's up, man? It's good to see you. I've been on a bit of a hiatus over the past couple of weeks, so I didn't do the AMA. I think it was last week, and
Last
I
week.
really, I actually haven't been on social media actually either. So
Oh,
it's been kind of refreshing and nice, frankly. I'm in a much better mood when I am always on social media. So, yeah, I'll casually start bringing that back in within reason. So it's good to be back, though.
yeah.
Yeah,
Good,
man.
man. Good.
Yeah.
Well, it's glad to have you back. It's always fun to do a recording with Sean, but he's not you, Ryan. He's
He's
just
no
not
he's
you.
no Ryan Mickler, but he's a
No.
very close. Well, I was going to say second, but then that would put you behind him. So we'll say a very close third, a very
It's
very
okay.
close third.
It was already assumed that he was two. So I've accepted it.
Yeah. Well, you
All
guys always
right,
do a
man.
great job, and you serve the guys well. So I appreciate you stepping up in my absence. So let's get into some questions today.
Yeah, sounds good. So we're going to field questions really from two locations. From the Iron Council. To learn more about the Iron Council, go to orderman.com/Iron Council. It's closed. However, we're going to open that up next quarter. And so kind of stay tuned and we'll let you know when we
It's not
open
even next
membership back up.
quarter. Just to give you the heads up
Well,
on it, it will be.
yeah.
Let me just do the math here in my head. It will be September 15th ish. So
Yeah.
a little more than a month. You got about 5 weeks and we're going to open it back up. So definitely go to orderofman.com/Iron Council and sign up to be notified when we open up, because we're open for a very short window. And of course, that doesn't bind you into signing up for the Iron Council. It just gives you the opportunity when we go live in about 5 weeks.
Yeah. So you're notified appropriately is what you're saying.
That's right.
Got it. And then we'll be fielding some questions from Facebook. To join us on that Facebook group, go to facebook.com/group/order of man. All right. Yeah, let's hop into it.
Let's
So,
do it.
Drew, what's up, guys? How much more than the cost of living per year should a family strive to earn? I'm working to build my business to both take care of my family needs today and working to build out my vision for the short and long-term future.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's an interesting question. I do appreciate the fact that he's thinking about cost of living, because I've seen a lot of people out there who assume that just because they make good money now, that in the next 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 years, that if they just keep their current income, that they'll be fine, and you won't, because of the
Mm,
eroding power of inflation. It's very hard to see. It's almost as an invisible tax. It's very, very hard to see and quantify. But if you look at the math, and it's a little hazy because I haven't talked about it for a long time, but if you have just a 3% inflation rate, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, so we'll swing back on that one. But if you had just a 3% inflation rate over, I believe, 20 or 30 years, it erodes your spending power by half, which means that if you're making, for easy math, $200,000 per year today, at a 3% inflation rate over, and I can't remember if it's 20 or 30 years, then that $200,000 is going to spend like $100,000, which means that if the milk is now $8 instead of $4, you can see how much of a problem that's going to be if your income just stays the same. Now, to go back to what I was saying with inflation and cost of living, we hear all sorts of numbers. We've heard that it's as high now as it's been in the last 40 years, which statistically is accurate. The interesting thing about the way the government calculates inflation and cost of living is they take out some of your everyday expenses that you would need, like food, like fuel for your vehicle. And what is impacted most currently by inflation? Well, food costs and
yeah.
fuel costs. So the government plays with that data. So even though it's high right now, it's actually higher than what is being reported. Now, when you say, what should we make above and beyond inflation? I don't know. I don't know that there's a hard and fast rule, but I think there are things that you can control. Number one is you can control your spending. So being very careful about how you spend, when you spend. I know a lot of people who, when the going's good, they just spend, and spend everything. And then when it's tough, they sell off everything they just bought over the past 2 to 5 years. It's not a great way to live because of the depreciating nature of cars and trailers and boats and all this other stuff that people buy.
Yeah.
But if you can manage your spending and then also be smart when it comes to purchases. So one thing that I've seen a lot of people do is they'll go in, they want to buy a new house, and they'll go in and they'll talk with a mortgage lender, and then that mortgage lender is going to give them about what they can qualify, right? People go in and pre-qualify. Yeah. Well, they want to sell homes. Real estate agents want to sell homes. Lenders want to lend money so they can collect interest. So they're going to make sure that you're on the red line of what is possible, not over, because then that puts them at risk, but not under. They want you to buy the biggest home possible. And so I see people's income to debt ratio, specifically as it relates to their mortgage, be as high as like 40 and 50%. So if you're making 10 grand a month and you're paying $5,000 in mortgage payments, that's ridiculous. I would suggest that you pay no more than about 15%. And lenders and real estate agents are scoffing at me right now. That's because they have a conflict of interest. But you should not be spending more than 15% of your monthly income on your mortgage payment. It's just a ridiculous, ridiculous thing. Another way to look at that is 2 times your annual income. So if your income is a couple $100,000 a year, $400,000, $450,000 home would be pretty appropriate and keep you at the right amount. So again, depending on interest rates, which are now increasing, it's just, we are in a very, very difficult financial time right now, and we're just not experiencing the full ramification or weight of what we will over the coming months. So let's be very smart. The only other thing I would say to that, Kip, and I'd love to hear what you have to add, is you want to make sure that you're putting away anywhere from 15 to 20% of your income, that you're investing it, that it's being put aside, that you're saving, that you're doing all the right things and all the smart things with it. And then that will help you realize how much above cost of living and that sort of thing that you need to plan for. So there's no hard and fast rule, but there are some hard and fast rules that I live by that indirectly answer your question.
Regarding inflation, are there particular investments or recommendations that you'd have, Ryan, that are inflation proof?
Well, nothing's inflation proof because we don't really know how an investment is going to perform. If we did, then the interest rate would be significantly lower than it could potentially be. So let me give you an example. If you were to get a new bank account, a checking account, you're going to get, if any interest at all, you're going to get 0.001 interest. On a savings account, you might get 0.5%, maybe if you're lucky. On a CD, you might start getting into 2 to 3%. Bonds might be 4 to 5%. But if you look at what the market has done historically, typically that's going to outpace inflation. And the reason that it's going to outpace inflation, I'm talking about the stock market in particular, is because those are the businesses and organizations that are creating new products, new goods, new services, trying to figure out a more efficient, effective way of doing things so it drives down the cost, and you get to participate in the market that you actually aren't a partner with in those businesses. So I do like the stock market, but you have to do it smart. You know, so many people play the market and they think they can beat inflation or beat the going rate. My philosophy in the market is you put your money into vehicles, you dollar cost average. I'm not going to get into all of that right now, but let's just suffice it to say today that you put money in on a monthly or a frequent basis, and that's going to drive over time the cost of your purchases for those stocks lower. That's called dollar cost averaging. And so the market is a great way to do that. And when I say market, real estate market, stock market, there's probably other markets, whether it's exotic vehicles, paint and artwork, those types of things are going to typically beat inflation. Commodities, gold, silver, that sort of thing are going to typically hedge against inflation. But there's no guarantees. If there's a guarantee, then your interest rates, your potential interest rate declines and you may not keep up with inflation.
Yeah, got it. Tony Urzi.
Also, one other thing, Kip, on that. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. No worries.
When it comes to keeping up with inflation, also your own business. So people say, hey, Ryan, if you had $50,000 or $100,000, what would you do with it? I'd invested in my business because I'm in control of my business and I know what my business can do. And that might help me unlock or take the throttle off my business to really go that much further.
Yeah. Increase cash flow or whatever else. Yeah.
I might dump $100,000 into marketing and, make 5, 6, $700,000 on that $100,000. That's a pretty good rate of return. And that would turn around quick too.
Yeah. As a business owner, I'm curious if you ran into this through the years as well. I always had a hard time with investments and savings and things like this, because whenever I'd have a conversation with the wife about investing in something, I would always default to or we can just increase our cash flow, right? Because as a business owner, you're just all these different ways to increase cash flow. So I was always fixated on cash flow constantly. I'm like, well, we could buy that and we have the slower return, or I can increase cash flow. And it was almost to the extent that I would almost be blinded. And that was just the answer to everything. Now, it obviously worked out to some extent. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing, but do you ever run into that constantly where you're just cash flow is king? Who cares about all this other stuff?
Yeah, I do, but I also see the value of diversifying my portfolio. And I realize that there might be things that would drive my business into the ground that I'm not aware of. And if that's the case, then that faucet turns off.
All your cash flow. Yeah.
Right. So I hear what you're saying, and I do that. And I also invest in other things.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Tony Urzi, how would each of you define emotional intelligence and how can we increase it? Thanks for all you guys do.
You want to lead off on that one, Kip?
Sure. So the way I would define emotional intelligence is really in owning and being aware of where your emotions are coming from and the story behind them. I find that emotional intelligence. I think it's okay to be emotional. I think it can serve you. It's good to be present to those things. But when I think about emotional intelligence is, once again, and I'm just kind of repeating myself here, is if I'm mad, if I'm happy, if I'm frustrated, if I'm jealous, where's that coming from? And then being able to put the pause button and having the evaluation of, does this serve me, and understanding where those emotions are coming from so I can act appropriately, agnostic of the emotion.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with just about all of that. I think that's accurate. If I were to sum it up, it's very similar. It's not suppression of emotion. It's not hiding from emotion or not experiencing emotion, but really striving to understand where that emotion is coming from and what it's trying to teach you. I don't really think there's any negative emotion. I don't think anger is a negative emotion. Now, I think the way that we might express anger can be negative, but the emotion in and of itself is amoral. Actually, it's not even amoral. I think it's actually helpful. We as human beings, whether you believe we're created or have evolved to where we are, would not be experiencing this broad array of emotions if they weren't somehow here to serve us and help in some way. So when you're angry, instead of not wanting to be angry, maybe we ought to do a better job of figuring out why it is we're angry and then addressing the root cause of the issue. If we're sad, if we're mad, if we're glad, if we're happy, figure out why that's the case, and then either strive to address it or eliminate it. Or if you're happy and glad and joyful and fulfilled and proud, then figure out what's causing you to experience those emotions and work more towards that. And that to me is emotional intelligence. Now, Tony's second part of the question is, how do you develop more of it? Well, you act on it and you listen to it and you give yourself time to experience it. So how many of us spend time during the day thinking about how we feel? As men, you almost cringe when you say that. But really think about, how am I feeling right now? Well, today, for me personally, I'm feeling hopeful. I'm feeling optimistic. I'm feeling actually pretty proud with what I've been able to accomplish even this morning. I've got some projects done around the house and spent some time with the kids, and I feel pretty dang good. And I don't just leave it there. Now I'm thinking, well, why is that the case? Why do I feel good? Well, I went and ran errands with my two of my boys today, this morning, and had a good conversation with my wife. And I was pretty productive with business meetings. And I know what I'm going to do the rest of the day, and my day's all mapped out. So I'm feeling really good right now. And therefore, that's the work I need to continue to do. So I'm going to do that again this afternoon and do it tomorrow. And that's emotional intelligence. But it just takes you carving out some time periodically throughout the day to think about how you're feeling in any given moment, and then asking yourself, how did you get to that point? And then striving to create more of it in your life.
There are two principles when I think about Tony's second question, how do we increase it? There's two things that I've latched onto in my past, and I continue to kind of come back to them. And I realize they're a little bit of a play on words, but they resonate with me and kind of get me in the right mindset. The first one is that we look at life through goggles. And it's like when you go snowboarding, you used to snowboard back in the day. I'm not sure if you snowboard anymore, but you know how you'd put the orange goggles on, and you'd be riding all day, and then all of a sudden you lift them up and you're like, oh my gosh, it's bright.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
forgot what reality looked like. You evolved to the goggles that you had on. And so the reminder that we all look at the world through a different colored lens, and that there's a difference between perception and reality. That's concept number one that really resonates well with me. The second one, which is maybe a little bit more controversial, is that there's no right and wrong. Those are judgments. And that really helps me, because typically when I'm emotionally driven and I'm maybe reacting at a negative way, it's because I believe that something is wrong that should be a particular way, versus dealing in reality of, well, it's not right or wrong, it's just what's so. And that concept and the idea that we constantly judge all things as, well, it shouldn't be, or it should be this way all the time, blocks us from having more intellectual and critical thinking and looking beyond the judgment and saying, well, but why is it that way? What's the more detailed scenario of why it's that way, versus just stopping of like, it shouldn't be this way, and now I'm just emotional about it. And so just holding on to perception and reality, not always aligned. And then second, that it's the human nature of us to always label everything as right and wrong. And sometimes it's more powerful to realize that it's not right or wrong, it's just what is so, and then have some critical thinking around the current circumstance, regardless of my expectations of it.
Yeah. I mean, you're much better at that than I am, because I do place those expectations, but I do also try to, when I am angry, I say, for example, well, I shouldn't be feeling angry. But that is actually true. I shouldn't be angry. So why am I? So I don't stop it there and put a period at the end. Well, I just shouldn't. And then I force myself not to.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I don't think people should be perpetually angry. If you're angry all the time, something's wrong. So what's wrong? Which drives to the point that you're making. So I think we're very much in agreement with that.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Hopefully that helps, Tony. Tony's such a stud. Can I just say I appreciate Tony?
Yeah, I mean, Tony's
seriously,
he's such a great person. Such a great person.
Such a great guy.
Yeah.
All right. Brandon Ballard. My wife's parents have a tendency to guilt her into doing things she has already said she can't do. Small example from yesterday. Her mother asked my wife to sing in church choir in place of her mother. Our son doesn't feel well and asked to stay home from church that day, but her mother called and bugged her about it until she caved. I was running sound for our church and was unable to stay home with our son, so we had to bring him and keep him away from everyone else. How do I encourage my wife to have a hard conversation with her family without stepping in and creating unwanted tension between myself and her parents?
If I had to guess, I would assume that your wife is a people pleaser. So, and her parents know that because that's their daughter. So they can take advantage of her. And I don't think I imagine they're not doing it out of spite or to get her. There's no devious intent behind it, but they are doing it all the same. So I don't know. I don't know what you do as a husband to help her other than communicate that to her and give her some tools to be able to say no or help. Because if you become the shield, then that's a problem because your wife never deals with it, and it's going to create tension and animosity between you and your in-laws. Immediately what comes to mind to me is, would your wife be open to therapy? And that actually might be a really valuable tool for her so that she can learn to express herself and stand up for herself. And it's coming from a third party, it's not coming from you. So it's not going to create any tension and animosity between you and your wife. And it's not going to create any tension and animosity between your wife, or excuse me, your in-laws and you, because you're not the mediator between them, and you're not that wall and the go-between. And it's this third party, this qualified, reputable third party over here, teaching your wife how to have pride in herself, how to say no, how to protect her time and her attention and energy. And she'll get better at it, and she'll be able to communicate herself better. And you don't have to get in between anything and create problems that aren't actually there right now.
Totally. I don't know if I don't, well, I think what you said is I totally agree with. Another thing to ask or maybe have a conversation with her about is walk through kind of the emotional state of, why does she cave in? Well, it's because I don't want to let my mom down. Okay, well, and maybe walk through the way that she could have that conversation with her mother and express to her how much that she wants to help and step in, but this is a higher priority, and that her son's a higher priority, and address the concern that she has that typically causes her to cave into the situation, and address it in a way that's powerful.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I'd add.
I agree with that. I would say be careful. I know my own personality, and I push hard, and then that creates tension and friction and other stressful points for my wife that
Are
aren't already
unnecessary.
existing. They don't exist, and so I do it, and it creates more problems
Totally.
than. So in my, it's like it's like COVID. The cure is worse than the ailment. So you go to your wife and you're like, well, let me help you. And no, you need to do this and do all this, fix this. And then now she's mad at you because you're being the way that you are. I'm just speaking from experience. And the issue that I was really trying to solve is really on the back burner to the new issue that I created. So be careful,
Totally.
tread lightly.
Yeah. Meanwhile, mom and dad are trying to stretch their daughter and get her to share talents and do things that she's so amazing at.
Could be.
And
Yeah, could be.
that's the only reason why they're bulldozing her a little bit, you
Could
know?
be. Yeah. Very,
Yeah.
very good point. Very good point.
Yeah. All right. Daniel Castleberry. My wife and I are making a budget and attempting to live beneath our means and make good investments to retire early. What things do you believe people are overspending on, and or what should people be cutting out of their lives to save more money? Oh man.
Well, it's usually entertainment and technology is usually what it is.
Totally.
It's
Yeah.
you're buying all the phones and all the gadgets and all the gizmos and the new technology, or even if you're a hunter, you're doing the same thing. You're like, oh well,
Subscriptions.
there's a brand new bow that just came out, and I need this bow because the one that I have last year is the outdated model. Is it worse or better? No, it's the same. It's just not the new color. So it's always technology and entertainment. How many, you said subscriptions? That's entertainment. Typically it's Netflix, it's
Yeah.
Disney Plus, it's all these little things on your phone that you have that you're subscribed to. It's always what it is. When I was looking at budgets for a living, that's what it was. It was technology and entertainment. And usually technology is a form of entertainment, right?
Yeah.
We want to be entertained, and so there's this new phone that does better pictures than the last one. Well, are you a professional photographer? Oh no, I just like it. Well, okay. Maybe when your current phone dies, you can get the new one, but do you really need that one now? Probably not. So that's what I think most people are spending their money on unnecessarily. It's not food, it's not fuel, it's entertainment and technology always.
What's ironic, the worthless things that we don't need.
Yeah, I mean, we do need it, right? That's the problem. So You need to be entertained, of course. We as human beings, I mean, think about, there's little wood carvings that they found, little dolls that they found that they believe that children played with, 1,000 years ago. That's a form of entertainment. It's also a form of teaching. And so I look at my daughter when she plays with her dolls and I think, well, that's entertainment. Yes, but she's also learning how to be a nurturer. So I'm not saying entertainment's wrong. My wife and I went and saw a movie last week, and so am I not supposed to go to the movies with my wife because I should cut out entertainment? No, like we need that. We had a good time. We saw a movie. We enjoyed each other's company. That's a good thing. So I'm not technology. We're using technology right now. I'm dealing with some technological issues with my phone and my computer. Like, oh, I need it for my business. That's the catch, is that we actually do need those things, and so we can convince ourselves that we need all of the things instead of just the necessities.
Yeah, good call. Good call. All right, Kelby Jones, when will I see you guys at one of Tim Kennedy's Sheepdog response courses? I'm heading back to Protector 2, August 19th through the 20th in Austin.
Yeah, I would like to go to that, but frankly, I'm not right now. Just with everything else that I have going on, I've really made a conscious effort, especially with the book coming out, to not take on new tasks, not take on new assignments, and be very thoughtful about how I'm spending my time and resources and energy. So, yeah, I'm not going to be doing that. Period.
Yeah.
I mean, I've actually had conversations with people that I admire and respect and trust and like, and they've asked about certain projects they wanted to implement and do, and how I could help and how I can partner. And I've actually probably not hurt some feelings, but disappointed some people because I've said no. And I feel bad that I've disappointed people, but I also feel pretty good that I know what my priorities are and I'm sticking to them as best I can.
See, I have no priorities in Kelby. I've been wanting to go to one of those for a while. As a complaint, they do Sheepdog response here in Utah, and I always like find out the day before, and I'm super annoyed. Like,
Oh, really?
like, yeah, like I always find out about it super late. But it's something on my radar for sure that I've been wanting to check out. So
It's not that you
cool.
don't have priority. It's just your priorities are different. It's like,
yeah,
that is a priority. That's
or
cool.
might have some time for that. Yeah.
Right.
I
And that's
would like
cool
to make time for that.
Yeah. I think we should do a better job at that. And I struggle with this, is we see what everybody else is doing and we're like, well, I want to do that. And I want to learn how to shoot a bow, and I want to train jujitsu, and I want to go to that event, and I want to be at this thing, and I want to be included on this panel or in this presentation. Okay, well, is that really what you want? If you really drill down and think about the course of your life, is that what you want? Or do you just want the notoriety or the sense of inclusion, or the feeling that comes from it? Or is that really what you want? And I and many other men should really think about what we're engaged in and ask ourselves, is this really what I want? Or is this the cool thing that everybody else seems to want?
Yeah, good call. Ryan Gent, you and Ryan have talked about allowing and encouraging other men to step into your children's lives to be able to coach and raise them more effectively in areas that you cannot. How much does a man enable and encourage this in a relationship with his wife without relinquishing sovereignty? To be clear, I'm not suggesting a man not seek to be comprehensive in his relationships, just interested in hearing your thoughts on this dichotomy.
I don't quite understand, with his wife, letting other men into his wife's life. I don't quite get that part of it.
Yeah. How much does a man enable and encourage this in a relationship with his wife without relinquishing sovereignty?
So if I'm understanding correctly, Ryan believes that if he lets other men into his children's lives, that he feels like he's relinquishing some of his sovereignty as a father and husband. That's what I understand.
I think so, but I'm also kind of confused because he says in a relationship with his wife.
Yeah.
Like,
so
how does that?
Let me just address with the wife. Like, you don't let other men into your wife's life. Like I've never suggested that. So that's a
Oh, is that
non-issue.
what you're thinking he's
I don't know. I don't
asking?
know what he's asking. I'm just saying if with his wife, I don't know what you mean. Now, with regards to your sovereignty, now I think what he's saying is that he's wondering if his wife will think he has less sovereignty or authority within his home if he's letting other men help his children, but that's kind of ridiculous. That's like you're not relinquishing control of your home or your position within the home by letting a coach your son's football team. Like I don't understand. It's a really hard question for me to compute because I've never once thought that because my two oldest sons have a powerlifting coach that I'm not their father or I'm less than.
And if
I
you
don't understand.
do feel that way, Ryan, you would say that's ego coming into play, not necessarily what's best for your children.
Yeah. And I have felt like my sons might talk about their powerlifting coach, Sean Moore, and I might say, oh my gosh, I have to hear about this guy again. And that's
Yeah.
ego. But I've never thought, well, I'm losing my children and I don't have sovereignty over it. I've never, that doesn't even cross my mind. Why wouldn't I want them to be with other people? Like I realize other people know stuff that I don't. They're more talented, more gifted. Maybe they have a set of skills that I don't possess. Like I know all of that. So it doesn't, it doesn't bother me. Now, if they're raising my children, that's different, but no, having other people help your children in meaningful and constructive ways that are credible and moving them towards a mission and desire they have. No, that's actually what you should be doing. And you should feel proud that you're in the position. Like I'm proud that we're in a position where we can hire a coach for my two sons to help them with powerlifting. We're in that position. My wife and I created that. We're proud of that.
Yeah.
I don't think less of myself because they're doing that. I think we're doing a pretty dang good job in that department.
Right. Let's just assume though that it bothers you to the extent that you're reacting in a way that you don't want your son to do powerlifting or you don't want these relationships. Maybe let's talk about that a little bit. What are some tactics or how do you get past feeling that you're being replaced or that you're not actively doing your role and these other men maybe are?
Just get over yourself. Like I don't think there needs to be a tactic. Just get over yourself. You're putting yourself ahead of your kids. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're like, my ego is more important than them developing into powerlifting.
And what's best for them. Yeah.
Doesn't that sound ridiculous? Because it is ridiculous. So how do you deal with it? Like, what are the tactics? Just get over it and start putting your kids ahead of your own selfish desire for authority or this position of power or the title, and realize that your job is to render yourself obsolete. I've said that before. Your job is to put yourself out of work. So to myself, I'm like, well, cool. The sooner I can do, that's not right. I was going to say the sooner I can do this, the better. That's not right. It's not really how I feel anyways, but the more effectively I can do this, the better. And what that means is that I need them to have other influences because I can teach them some fundamentals about deadlifting. I can't teach them how to be expert power lifters because I don't know. I don't know. I'm not credible. So I get over myself and get somebody in who's better. And part of that might be that you're not doing anything that's hard.
Or low confidence in regards to how you're showing up as a father.
Well, what I'm saying is you're doing well enough in every department that you think you have it all figured out. That's part of the reason I like jujitsu so much is I go in there and it hurts. It's painful mentally, emotionally when you get beat up. But also I'm like, that's right. Every day I go in, I'm reminded, oh yeah, you're not as good as you think you are. And so the question then becomes, what in your life are you doing that's challenging you and pushing you and making you feel less than? Because that feeling is not bad. Society would have you think it's bad. Culture wants you to think it's bad. Just eat, drink, and be merry, indulge in everything, be as fat as you want, be as lazy as you want. If you get laid
And
off, it
think you're
wasn't your
amazing without
fault.
effort. Yeah.
It was your employer, it was the economy, it was the evil other side of the political aisle. It's whatever. It's everything but you. And I feel like too often that we aren't doing enough to really feel the sting and weight of discomfort and then doing something about it. So maybe our egos are a result of being pretty good. I think that with the podcast and with the Order of Man movement, it does pretty well. So am I God's gift to entrepreneurship? No. Although sometimes I might feel like it, or that I'm invincible, especially when I get emails all day that are thanking me for the wonderful things I've done to save everybody's marriages and health and all this other stuff. And then something happens in my own personal life. And I'm like, oh, yeah, yep, I'm not God's gift to fill in the blank.
Yeah. Chase Kimball, I'm going through a separation right now, and my wife and I had our first marriage counseling session. One of the questions our counselor asked was, what does intimacy mean to you? I initiated the separation due to this very issue. It made me really think about what it means to me. I wanted to relay this question to you guys. So what does intimacy with your wives look like? What does it mean to you?
I will answer that question. He said he initiated the separation because of this
Of the
issue.
lack
I'm
of
wondering,
intimacy.
yeah, I'm wondering
Yeah,
if his wife
maybe.
wasn't being intimate with him. It sounds like that's kind of how I read
Yeah.
that. For me, yeah, obviously there's the physical component. And I think generally speaking, we as men are more physical in nature. And so being physically intimate, having sex is the thing that drives us from an intimacy level. And we tend to look at it and think that if she's having sex with me, that means she loves me.
Yeah.
And I think obviously there's an element of truth to that, right? But there's other connections that I think go into intimacy, and these are things that I'm trying to work on and trying to focus on and be receptive to in her, my wife, and that's being able to sit down and have a serious conversation, or to sit down and actually hear what it is she's saying. Sometimes we we hear our spouse, but how often are we listening to what they're actually saying and internalizing it without trying to come up with a solution or trying to fix what we perceive as their shortcomings, and just actually listen? And what a great way to connect with her, different than sex. So I think intimacy is about connection. And that's not just one connection, that's an infinite number of connections, but it's physical, it's mental, it's emotional, it's also spiritual. There's a covenant
Yeah.
there. It's a spiritual connection as well. So that's how I view it.
I see it the same way. The one thought that I'd add to the conversation is, and maybe this is just Chase, me sharing, so you can relate to some extent. This is important, even the physical aspect of it. If I don't feel a level of connection and intimacy with my wife, I feel alone. I feel that I'm on my own. I feel a lack of like love and caring of what's happening in my life. And if that lack, and ironically enough, there could be a physical element, but if there's intimacy lacking in the physical element, then it almost feels like disingenuous, or even I don't even know the word, like dirty or not pure in its nature, like that was just sex. And so the level of connection is really important to me. And I assume I'm a little bit different than most guys, like where most guys are like, wham, bam, thank you, man, I'm good. I'm like, oh, hell no. Right. Like it's got to be, it has to have that connection to it. Otherwise, I just feel like I'm just having sex with someone, and I have no desire to just randomly have sex. Like that connection kind of needs to be there as part of the process for me anyway.
I don't actually believe that that's different than most guys. Now, look, there's a lot of guys who are promiscuous, right? Who will go out
Yeah.
and behave like that for sure because it feels good to get off, right? That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
But I think that's detrimental to a
Yeah. You don't
man's
think most
well-being.
guys are that way?
I don't.
It feels like most guys are that way. I feel
I
like
think they
maybe
act
I'm
like
more
that.
emotional. Yeah,
No,
more
because
emotional than
I'm
most
actually
guys.
I'm very much like you. I want to feel the emotional, spiritual connection to it as well. It's more meaningful. It feels
Yeah.
better. It's better. And yeah, I think a lot of guys act like that, but I do believe that it's detrimental and it eats at you. And over time, if you engage in that enough, you're really going to run into some serious problems. So yeah, yeah, that's what I think on intimacy.
Yeah. Last thought. What does intimacy mean to you? That's a powerful question because it causes us to evaluate that we're adding meaning to it, and the communication around it, and the fact that just your meaning doesn't necessarily mean that's hers. And five love languages, that's obviously, we have a tendency to express love in the way that we would like to receive it, and sometimes it's not the same for your spouse. And so just be mindful of the meaning that she might have, and if it's different than yours, that's necessarily not right or wrong. Back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, it's just that way.
Right.
And that's thus the importance of the conversation.
Right. Yeah. Agreed.
All right, Brian Davis. I come from a family that tends to make excuses instead of needing life changes. I'm a fairly high performer, and I feel driven to help and encourage them, especially my brothers, to do more with themselves. This causes strife in these relationships, but I don't want to give up on them. What would you do?
These are really good questions. And I feel a bit at a loss for some of these questions as far as what can I share because I see it in myself too.
I know. I was totally relating to Brian. I'm like, I feel like this all the time.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that what we do? Okay, here's what I would say. The way that we respond in these situations when we see somebody we care about who's not performing to the degree that we think they're capable of is an indicator of our love for them, right?
Like, don't make yourself wrong for feeling this way.
I'm not even going to say that because you could be wrong.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why you actually could be wrong.
Okay.
You could be wrong because you might be undermining yourself and the people you're trying to serve. But I still believe that if you do it and you're pushing a little too hard as a man, it doesn't mean that it means that you love them. That's what that means. You're just expressing it incorrectly. And it is unequivocally wrong. Why? Because it's not producing the results that you desire. So that's how we measure performance. We don't measure performance by our intentions. We've all heard the phrase, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. So we don't measure, or at least we should not measure our performance by our intentions, but by how it's received and the performance that takes place after, whether it's for ourselves or for the people that we care about. So, for example, if you browbeat your kid or your wife, then because you love her or him, and they're withdrawing because of it, or they're upset because of it, and maybe they quit the team or something or their activity because of it, well, you completely undermined yourself. That wasn't your intention. Your intention was to bring out the best in them. So you did it wrong. You actually did it in. So when you say, well, don't make yourself wrong. No, actually ask yourself if you're wrong, because you might be the problem. And I've been the problem. So then we need to evaluate it and look and see, oh, you know what? That's actually not what I want for my wife. That's not what I want for my children. So what can I change about my own behavior to then elicit a better response and performance in them for their own benefit, not for mine, but for their own benefit. I can't necessarily tell you what it is because these are things I struggle with as well. But I think it's a good evaluation process that you might be the problem, not because your intentions are wrong, but because the way you're trying to facilitate it is. So maybe try to be a bit more understanding. Maybe try to be a bit more open. Maybe ask some questions. Maybe we could all do a better job acknowledging when the people in our lives do actually perform instead of critiquing and nitpicking every little thing about every little detail and say, you know, that was awesome. And if they don't want to do it to 100%, fine. So what? Maybe they're good at 80. Is it your job to get them to 100? No. It's your job to be there and present and available and teach and offer and instruct and guide and all these things. And then it's their job to take it to where they want to go. So just, it's okay. It's okay. And if they're not doing anything and they're wrecking their lives, okay, then you come in and you offer what you can offer, whether that's a shoulder to cry on or a sounding board, or maybe you come across a resource and you share it. And then you evaluate, okay, were they receptive to that? Yes, they were. Cool. You're on the right track. No, they were totally closed off to that. Well, don't do that again. Try something else, experiment with something else. And if they reject it altogether in every shape and form, okay, like what more can you do? There's nothing more you can do. So don't just change, just adjust. We can change.
I've gotten super present to the idea that the most effective growth for anybody is for them to come to that conclusion on their own and to be committed to what they're doing versus doing it out of pure pressure, coercion, micromanagement, or authority. And so from an employment perspective, I ask my team, where's their commitment level to what we're doing as an organization and what we're doing as a team? When we have conversations with new battle team leaders, the conversation I'm really looking for is, are they all in? Are they committed to what the Iron Council is about? Are they committed to what Order Man is about? If they're committed to it, they will find a way. There's a big difference between someone that does something because they're bought in and they're fully committed versus, well, I did it because Ryan wants me to, but I'm not really bought into the idea, but I'll do it anyway because he's my boss. And when I hit a roadblock in that example, I throw my hands up and I go, freak, I knew it. I knew this wasn't going to work because blah, 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 or whatever. But when I'm bought into what we're doing, when I'm fully committed, I find a way. And so me convincing a kid, me convincing an employee, me convincing a friend or whatever into trying to show up a powerful way is not the way. It is my job to create the art of the possible, or a possibility of being, and to be able to coach and guide them. But it's got to be their call. It's got to be their idea. And once again, it's like the lighthouse mentality, right? We show up in a very powerful way and we show them a way of being, and we can coach and help, but it's got to be their decision. And so and I'm just resonating, maybe saying it a slightly different way, Ryan, than what you're saying, is we can't coerce people into showing up a particular way. And there's ways that we can show up and communicate to them for them to make that decision on their own. And so I think I would just really focus on, how do we don't take away their sovereignty, don't take away their agency, and create possibility for them to make those decisions. And that is going to be a way more powerful approach to change and growth than any other, riding them hard or bulldozing them into doing something. And I'm not necessarily saying that's what he's doing, but just a word, I guess, a warning that I fall into, because I think that I should, force people to change because I know better.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
All right, Jeffrey Young, what's the best way to deal with lying from our teenage stepsons? For example, saying they did chores and didn't, stealing food or money from the family. So dealing with lying, and we might just say lying kids, but stepsons adds obviously a dynamic to it. But how do we deal with our kids that are lying to us?
Yeah, I think the first thing you do is communicate the expectation. Like, hey, if you're going to do chores, like you're going to do the chores, and you're not going to be able to participate in the things that you want to participate until I've gone in and checked them off. That's an easy thing to do, right? Hey, go clean your room. All right.
Yeah.
Then they're like, hey, can I go to the party or the movies with my friends tonight? Well, let's go look at your room. You do that 5 or 6 times. And by the way, when it's not done, you actually have to hold to your guns and say, no, you can't go do that because
you can't go.
That you made the decision that you didn't want to go. I didn't make the decision. You made that decision. When you, or if you don't want to be as heavy handed, well, look, you can go when you finish your room. Well, Dad, they're going right now and my room's going to take me an hour. Okay. And I told you this morning you had 12 hours to do it. That's on you. That's not on me. So just a little bit of accountability is going to go an extremely long way. When money comes up missing, accountability. Hey, son, I had $40 in my wallet and it's gone and I didn't spend it and mom didn't spend it. So I'm going to need you to answer as to where this went. And if you aren't willing to come clean on that, there's going to be consequences. There has to be consequences. That's the thing that people don't implement. And I don't know whether you do or not, but there's got to be consequences to these things. And then I think through those consequences, they're going to learn that, yeah, you can steal, but there's a risk to it. You can not do your stuff, but there's a risk to it here. There also might be some reasons that your child is lashing out or not listening. Maybe they want your attention. Maybe they're not getting attention, so they do it so they can get attention, even though it's not constructive. Yeah. That might be an issue. So that's something worth considering. Maybe there's some baggage or trauma in their life that hasn't been dealt with, especially as a stepchild. You don't know what their father's like. You don't. I mean, you've heard about it probably, but you don't entirely know the situation. Were they abused? Were they neglected? Were they hit? Like what happened? And is some of that stemming and pouring over into the new family dynamic? It could be. And so again, I go back, well, that might be some therapy. That might be some good long conversations with your current wife about why it is the way it is and what happened. There might be some real reasons why this is the case. And I think you do well to figure out what that is.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to Tony's question earlier about increasing our emotional intelligence and trying to understand their emotional intelligence. They might steal money from you because they have a problem with you, something that hasn't been addressed. They haven't communicated it. And then before we kind of close that up and go, well, they shouldn't have a problem with me. Well, how are we showing up where they're unable or unwilling to communicate with us? Is it because the last time they tried that, you lashed back out and you weren't open to the communication? So I'd really like we always preach, right? Take some extreme ownership and look for how you're showing up in the relationship. People will react with you often based upon what you allow. And so assess yourself from that perspective. Two thoughts that crossed my mind. The first is, one of my favorite books of all time is Outward Mindset. And this idea that we're in zero position of correction if we don't have an established relationship first, because it's not about caring. It's about you fixing them, which doesn't feel like caring. Mm-hmm. And so focus on, where's your relationship with them? Are you even spending time with them? Or do you understand them? Are you having those conversations? And is that baseline established before you're in a position of correcting? We often approach this wrong. I approach this wrong with my stepson, Kiave, where I was like, hey, we can have a better relationship once you're not a shit. Right. And you need to change first, and then we can hang out, which is so disingenuous and comes across like a complete prick from my perspective, because I'm not seeing him as a human, as a person that's amazing and has an amazing possibility. I see him as something that needs to be fixed and changed before I'm willing to love him. Are you kidding? So establish relationship first before we're in a position of correction. The second thing that's just been really on my mind, it's ironic. I was thinking about this just yesterday when I was mowing the lawn. of what happens when I say, hey, you need to have your room clean, and and we don't enforce it, and then they go. Not just did we not like create consistency on consequences, I eroded trust in me. Literally, I said X, and I didn't hold my part of the bargain, even in a negative scenario, and trust gets destroyed.
Right.
We have to be consistent, and we have to honor our word, good and bad consequences, because trust is at what's at stake. And that shows up in the positive side. If you can't trust me, Ryan, to hold you accountable, then you're also not going to trust me to help you when you need my help, because I become untrustworthy.
Right.
I can't be counted on.
Well, not to mention, you're not going to trust yourself either. And that's an issue, right? If you can't trust that yourself to keep your word, you're going to have guilt, you're going to have sorrow, you're going to have remorse, you're going to have anger. And that might be directed at the people that you love, because you're the problem. You're the guy that's out of integrity. So you get yourself in integrity, even though it's the uncomfortable things that really matter. The comfortable things are good. They matter too. And you need to follow through on those. But it's actually when it's uncomfortable that you're actually tested as to whether or not you're the guy, right? You're the man, if you will. And you can get there and you can rebuild it if you haven't been there. But it takes some time, and it takes a lot of personal effort and work on yourself before anybody else. Let's take one more.
Joseph Ryan, I've heard that there is a phase in a marriage that many go through, not all, the falling out of love phase. If either of you have dealt with this phase, how did you deal with it, or how would you deal with it, growing apart or versus growing together?
I actually go
questions today, man. These are like tough.
They are good. They're tough. Yeah. I go back to that intimacy question. And I think people can fall back in love. I think a lot of the times there is still love there. And, we've heard the phrase, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. I think we can fall out of love. I think we can fall back in love, especially if there's a level of commitment to each other and a desire to try to make the situation better. So I don't think all is lost, but I think it comes back to that intimacy, and that's the connection. That's the connection that we're talking about in the four realms, if you will. So again, mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. And a lot of the times we as men will go straight to the physical because it's easy, it feels good, and it's like the end result. Like that's what we want, right? But it's those others that are going to be much harder for us. That mental, that emotional, that spiritual, and that will ultimately lead to other forms of connection like physical, if those are there. But I think if you can work on listening to her, you can work on, maybe it's going back to church if you've fallen out of church for a while. Maybe it's carving out every week a date night. Maybe it's your own personal work on becoming somebody who's attractive, even physically, mentally, emotionally. Maybe you're not right now, and so what can you do to make yourself more appealing and more attractive, that she's interested and enticed by that? These are all things that you can do. But yeah, I think that happens. I don't know if it's a phase or if it happens on a cycle or anything like that, but I think that does happen in marriages. I know of plenty of people who have and are currently going through that. And I've seen a lot of people, man, work through it, and it's hard and it's worth it. It's so worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. Just without a doubt, it can show up. I mean, I think it's just like any other relationship. Ryan, you and I, our relationship could go south easily just by not investing in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
I don't think marriages are any different, right? Or our relationship with our kids, our biological children that we have like an amazing love for. Those relationships can go south if we're not fostering them,
right?
If we're not investing time in them. And so I think it's no different for a marriage. Ironically enough, and for me, just to give you context, Joseph, as a consideration, it's usually conversation. My wife keeps signing up for damn like half marathons and races. You know why? is because she wants us to run together. And the reason why is when we run together, what do we do for an hour and a half? We talk. It's her favorite part of doing the race is being stuck with me on a trail running, because we're talking and I'm sharing how my day was. I'm sharing what's working, what I'm stressed out about, things that are bothering me. She's sharing the same thing, and we feel better connected with one another because we're having those conversations. So for us, it's like something as simple as that, just the constant communication and the touch base of what we're doing, what we're working on, what we're stressed out about, what's our concerns, and being able to have those conversations with one another.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. Like I said, great questions today. We'll call it a wrap. I think we have more that we'll get to next week. We want to make sure we get all of your questions answered. So we'll get to those next week. But Kip, why don't you bring it home for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main call to action, guys, to get notified when we open up the Iron Council mid-September. So go to orderman.com/Iron Council, sign up, get part of the newsletter, so that way you're being notified of what's going on and when that opens, so you're reminded. The other way to stay connected to us is connect with Mr. Mickler on socials at Ryan Mickler for both Twitter and Instagram, and then connect with us also on YouTube. We don't talk about that too much, but subscribe to the YouTube channel, and it's a really easy way to share the message and different episodes with people. Once again, it's about being that lighthouse and sharing the message and letting people come to that conclusion on their own. And a good way to do that is share these episodes and different posts that Ryan makes on Twitter and Instagram.
I love it. I love it. Well, good. You guys have your marching orders. So, man, make sure you get out there. We got a lot of things to work on. Keep working on those things. Check out the Iron Council. Kip, as always, appreciate you, brother. Guys, we'll be back on Friday. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.